Hello everyone and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. This week, a new project to preserve the stories and history of French Canadians who by the tens of thousands crossed the border to live in New England and upstate New York. Several Franco-American families this summer gathered to take part in a historical preservation project that many hope will keep their family's culture and heritage alive for future generations. A taste of Quebec filled the home, and in particular the kitchen of Rick and Priscilla Lauren, as several of their friends and family members gathered for an afternoon of sharing not only authentic Quebec cuisine, like Rick's grandfather's dumplings and maple syrup, but also memories of their French-Canadian heritage.
Look at the nose, look at the eyes. Yeah.
Rick's mom, aunt, and uncle, and some of their friends were all poring over old photographs that they were sharing with Rebecca Arnold and other students from Siena College, who came to the Lauren home in Chazy, New York to document the family's history that started in Quebec and then crossed the border when Rick's grandfather moved to northern New York in the early 1900s.
Do you know where it was taken or when it was taken?
Would that picture have been in Naperville, Uncle Richard? That picture? Naperville or Sherrington, don't know.
Giselle Hansen didn't speak a word of English when her family moved to the U.S.
They sold their farm there in Canada because the barn was really bad and they wanted. So things were better for farmers then here, a lot better. And then they just bought a farm here, with a donkey on the farm here, and they moved with 9 children. Wow.
The photos and stories are being collected by Janet Shideler, a French professor at Siena College, who has received a National Endowment for the Humanities grant to preserve and archive artifacts from the descendants of French Canadians whose families moved to upstate New York.
This is an effort to preserve and digitize artifacts from Franco-Americans, descendants of French Canadians who immigrated to the U.S. And we're collecting the stories behind those artifacts right here on the spot.
The stories of how and why their families made their way to the U.S. More than 1 million French Canadians from the early 1800s to mid-1900s who worked in the textile mills of New England and Cohoes, New York, or like Rick Lauren's grandfather, as farmers in northern Clinton County.
It's important to know where we come from. It's a great project.
This one is sent from, it looks like Ella. It says Ella, parent.
Evan Levesque, a history major at Siena, gathered info from Rick's aunt Audrey Falcon about her collection of old photos and postcards. For David Graham, who teaches French at Clinton Community College, it's important to compile and archive families' French-Canadian heritage.
And it's a great project. Number one, because family's important. And number two, because language is important, and because their culture is important.
The project still has another year to go, with Janet and students making trips to several more towns across the northern tier to gather more artifacts and families' histories. All of the data will be compiled and added to an online database. And by doing so, Janet will fulfill a promise she made years ago as a tour guide in Massachusetts, leading Franco-Americans on trips back to Canada.
I used to take people from Western Massachusetts up to Canada, and one day I discovered, as I looked at the list of passengers with me, that every single one of them had a French name. So I thought it was quite curious, and a gentleman who became a very dear friend, Monsieur Rivard, said, you know, someone has to tell our story. And I said, Monsieur Rivard, I promise you, I'll tell your story. So for me, this is, he's gone now, which underscores the urgency of this, you know, that while people know, while people remember, we need to tell that story.
These were very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing them with me.